Leases, are they worth the hassle? Today on the Landlord Coach Daily is show. It is Monday. Let's get it going.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Landlord Coach Daily is show. It is a little late on Monday, but here we are. It is a cold day outside. A little chilly. So hope you are all bundled up here in Indiana. It's a little bit chilly today. So I've got a candle burning and a space heater going and everything else. And it's not even December yet, but last day of November. So today we're going to be talking about leases. Are they worth the hassle? Reason for this discussion today, I was talking to a contractor friend of mine last week, and he was saying to me, there's a lot of things that I do want to say to a customer that I can't because, well, he's polite. And if you know him, Howie, I'm thinking of you. But he lives in New York, and it's just a little bit tougher out there when you're dealing with a client that is just wanting a lot of hand holding and nose wiping and butt wiping and all that. So there's lots of things that Howie doesn't really wear a filter very well. But anyway, there was another contractor I was talking to where, he was talking about not even wanting to deal with having a contract because they're not even worth the paper that they're written on. He wants to deal with people on a handshake, people that he can trust. So, why bother with a contract at all? Now, in my world, I deal in contracts, and of course, those are leases. So that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. I remember in the early days when I got started, and this is about 400 years ago, but I was in my early 20s. I had just bought a property, and I was walking out of the closing and I was thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. I've got a house now. I got to get it rented. So in the early days, it was stick a sign in the yard and run an ad in the Friday, Saturday, Sunday newspaper. And by the following weekend, you could generally have it rented. So in those early days, there really wasn't much in terms of tenant screening. Online was pretty much non-existent in terms of trying to find any sort of rental verification data or anything like that. So a lot of times I just didn't even bother. But of course, then I found a couple of people that wanted to live in this first property that I had. It was on Joseph Street. I never forget that. And I remember these three young adults. They were probably in their early 20s at best, and they all were moving in together. So they all gathered around. They all told me about they wanted to live there. We decided on a rent amount, and there I was. So now I'm thinking, okay, cool. Now I'm going to go ahead and I guess get a lease signed. Well, I didn't have a lease. So I did what every self-respecting or not knowing landlord does, and they hit the internet and download and steal and borrow from every lease that they probably could, and maybe throw in some of their own verbiage just to make it sound good. And that's what I did. And I did that for a number of years, and until it got challenged, then something else would change. And of course, then when I wound up with half a dozen properties at a time, I had a half a dozen different leases. So in the early days, it was definitely a lot easier, but I was thinking, this has to get better. I have to get more seamless in terms of putting these leases together, putting these contracts together, if they even make sense. Because at the end of the day, I would still get people that would move out in the middle of the night. At the end of the day, I would still get people not doing what they're supposed to doing. They would smoke in the property when they weren't. They would dig up the yard and plant a garden when they weren't supposed to. They would put swimming pools in the back when they weren't supposed to and kill the grass. They get these giant crop circles in the back. They'd have pets and when they weren't supposed to. So I was like, well, what's the point of a contract if people aren't going to abide by it? So many arguments for not having a contract at all. What's the point, right? Now, back then, it was pretty easy to rent properties. So again, this is back in let's see, my first property was in 1998. So this is my 22nd year of doing this. So back in 1998, it was still pretty easy to rent a property. Now there's way more renters than there was back then. Now, not just in numerical, but definitely in percentage. I think the last census data we checked was 36.6%, almost 37% of the population in the United States right now are renting. That's huge. That's if you're, looking at the census data of 330 million people living in the United States, that's just about 121 million people are renters. It's a huge demand. There's a huge need for rental housing, especially affordable rental housing. So, those data I got from, I had to go to the U.S. Census data because something seemed wonky about the data. I pulled it up under the Rental Protection Agency, rentalprotectionagency.com. We're going to come back to that. So when asked, and I went to this other site, when I got the rental data, I actually got it from the census and the IRS. But when asked why people are renting, this was interesting because this data came from porch.com of people who want to buy, but they can't. 65% were saying that they wanted to buy. But it's interesting. So this is overlapping data. This is not people. So these were just questions of reasons of why they wanted to be renters. So these were the top reasons. But the 46% wasn't sure where they wanted to live long term. So that means they wanted the flexibility of being a renter. The same with the 30% who wanted to be tied down. Again, these are overlapping. This isn't, if you look at the data right there, it's over 100%. So it's obviously, these are the top reasons as to why they wanted to stay residents, why they wanted to stay renters and not buy a property. This is a survey of over 1,000 renters from porch.com. So when you look back and you start to think of like, well, the vast majority of the people out there are mom and pop individual landlords, which is interesting because many of my clients that I work with are mom and pop individual landlords. In fact, all of them are. So, depending on the IRS data, if you're looking at 10.3 million tax returns in 2018 came back as single mom and pop landlords. They filed a Schedule E, which covered 17 million properties. So 10.3 million landlords over 17 million properties, which I found interesting because many of the individual mom and pop landlords that I talked to, in fact, all of them, I was asking them, of course, how is their collections going? How is that working out for you? And rarely, in fact, it was almost like a solution looking for a problem. Did they have a problem? The people, here's where it was funny. The people who were going to pay on time, they paid on time. The people who didn't pay on time, they were never going to pay on time anyway. So they end up having to work out a few different things, but generally people are honest. There's people know that they don't have to pay, but yet they're still paying because they know that they have to. They know that they want a good, reasonable place to live and their landlord is going to take care of them. So that brings me back to the conversation of, are leases worth the hassle? Because they have the value of a contract. Here's the thing. I get what the argument to say, well, a lease is only as good as the two people that are signing it. And I absolutely believe in that. But I think for far more than anything else, the lease and the contract and lease agreements, they spell out expectations. That contractor who was having difficulty with, people who didn't want to pay and didn't want to do all the things that they were doing, well, he was having problems. And I think, quite honestly, that there's lots of other problems in his world in terms of consistency. The expectations were never laid out in terms of the scope of the work, who's going to do what, how to handle change orders, things like that. And that's what a good contract will do. It doesn't need to be complex. It doesn't need to be long. It just needs to spell out what the expectations are. And I think that is the entire reason to have a lease always. Now, there are some people who do a lease and then go month to month after that. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. Not in my market. if there are markets where you have a very strong rental market where, you've got one person moving out the front door and you can get someone moving in the back door while you're painting and cleaning in the middle, then fine. And there are certainly strong rental markets that are like that. I personally wouldn't want to get stuck with a vacancy anytime after Thanksgiving, because it's going to stay vacant until at least the spring. Because here in Indiana, no one's going to want to move while there's snow on the ground. They will if they have to, but generally it's under a duress sort of situation where they're having to move to town for a job, or they're being evicted or something along those lines. So does it make sense to do a lease? Yes. Just make sure that your leases end when you're in the rental cycle, whatever that period is for you. If you're, again, if you're one of my 3 listeners that's watching this that doesn't happen to live in Indiana, then maybe that's different for you. Maybe, if you're in Miami, then maybe that's different for you. But I would always say I would want to match that up to the rental cycle in terms of when people are going to be coming, when you're going to get the most demand, right? So let's move on to the most ridiculous item of today. You will be surprised.
So ridiculous.
Yes, thank you, Kiara. So ridiculous. So I mentioned the rental protectionagency.com. So it is not a government agency, which might make you, because it's called agency, it's protectionagency.com. This is from what I can understand, a for-profit business. Not here to tear them down about that. Although they do seem to be very renter focused, because they've got a big giant button. If you look on the top there, a big giant yellow button that says, file a complaint. Again, I think it's file against a landlord or something like that, or complaint against a landlord, whatever it is. It's very renter focused. That's fine, because, there obviously wouldn't be such demand, if they didn't need it. But anyway, I was looking through the data, and the number of renters, and you might not be able to see it there because it's pretty small, but the number of renters in the United States says 114.7 million. And that number, it didn't jump out at me right away as anything wrong, but the number of landlords of 23.5 million definitely did not sound right to me. And part of that reason was because I happen to know the data of number of landlords that are on Facebook. Number of landlords on Facebook are around 3.5 million. So I was thinking, there's no way that there's going to be 20 million, like the sampling didn't match, right? I was thinking that seems really off. So here's the thing that you're really got to be careful about what you're looking, or what data sources you reference on the internet, because this looks legit. So I went to a data source that I felt that I could trust, and that would be obviously the census data, which is the census data of 330 million people living in America, 330 million Americans, okay? And using the data of 36.6% of them being renters, that puts the actual renter data at 121 million, not 114 million. But what's 7 million people among friends? Okay, here's where I kind of got a burr in my saddle blanket. The IRS, now what I did is I went to the IRS website and I looked for the number of Schedule Es that were filed that reported rental income. That number was 10.3 million as of 2018. So the number is even higher than that. This number is reporting 23.5 million. There's no way that there's 13 million more landlords that have grown in that period of time. Just would not happen. So I'm sitting wondering where they're actually getting that data from. They're saying the data is in real time. I think that their algorithm or whatever, their clock is off. Because even as I'm looking at more recent data, that my best estimate would put the numbers somewhere closer to maybe 8.5 million. Somewhere between, well, those are mom and pop landlords. So I would say probably closer to maybe, 13, 14 million, somewhere in there. But it just depends on what numbers that you're counting, because the individual landlords, you've got the individual landlords. And then of course you've got the landlords that are filed under LLCs and LLPs, which again, could be individual mom and pop landlords. I own several properties under an LLC. I would be considered an individual landlord, right? But because I own some properties in my personal name and I own some properties in my LLCs and stuff like that. But most of that stuff's been moved out. Most of that stuff's been moved into trusts and so forth, right? For adequate protections, which you should do too. And which most individual landlords and mom and pop landlords who are doing that sort of stuff, they do that for tax reasons and just other precautionary reasons and things like that. So the rental protection agency, it just kind of makes me scratch my head in terms of why not, like, what's the purpose of overinflating the number of landlords on there and underinflating the number of renters? I don't really see the purpose of that. Maybe there's something that's wrong in their algorithm. Maybe they just threw a number up there they thought was adequate. I don't know. They never put a source of data up there, so it just kind of makes me wonder. But yes, rentalprotectionagency.com, you made the most ridiculous item of the day for today. Congratulations. I don't have anything to send to you. Maybe I'll send you a gift card. So today, what I want to do, I talked about Cyber Monday. We talked about the leases and lease agreements, so I think this would be appropriate. I do have an offer. This is a landlordcoach.com/million, and that would get you a copy of the $1 Million Lease. So I am selling it. I'm not going to try to mislead anybody. So it's for a very low price. I usually do not sell the lease all on its own. Usually it's part of the become a VIP in the rental business package. But I am breaking that out just for some people who maybe want the lease and they want to kind of get a copy of it, and pull different portions of it out that would be relevant for them. I totally get that. Super low price. I am going to leave it up for a few days for those of you who can maybe take advantage of Cyber Monday. Then I'll leave it up for this week. But landlordcoach.com/million, I'll leave it up as long as the link is there and the link is active. The deal is still good, but I will bring that down at any time. I just will leave that up so enough people can take action. But again, we'll leave it there. So let us go ahead and leave off with a quote of the day. A verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on, by Samuel Goodwin. So very true. That's all I have for today, everybody. Please be sure to place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. But most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have an awesome rest of your day. Bundle up. Stay warm. It is a frosty one out there. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.